I am an actor, mostly.
Okay. Now, why are you here?
I am here because my ex-husband is suing me for an op-ed I wrote. My ex-husband, with whom I shared a life, speak about our lives in the way that they have. This is the most painful and difficult thing I've ever gone through. I had to write, I think I gave 7 witness statements under oath testimony. I sat on the stand for 4 days under mostly cross-examination. And up until this point, it was the hardest thing I had ever had to do. I come from Austin, Texas, a small town outside of Austin that you probably haven't heard of. No one has. I would help him. I was more of a crash test dummy. You know, when you train a horse, it's a wild animal. It doesn't necessarily like to be ridden. And there are people out there who are crazy enough, like my dad, to pick that as a profession, I guess. And he was really good with horses, and I was the son he never had, so it was my job to, stay on.
And what, if anything, did you learn from your father about how to react to the horses?
Well, with training horses, I guess the key things are to not show fear, not get intimidated, not show fear, be tough and calm. I just always pushed myself to be able to accelerate the process. I wanted to, get out of school as fast as I could, and I wanted to do more things with my life than stay in Texas. I worked at a modeling agency that was also, offered photography classes, makeup classes, hair and makeup classes for people that were pursuing a career in entertainment. And I started taking classes that I paid for by working there, effectively as a trade. And I eventually worked there long enough to be able to pay for my headshots, which are the pictures that you use in the industry to promote yourself, in whatever, acting, modeling, or both.
And what, if any, charitable work did you do when you were still young?
It started off as a requirement for the school I went to, and then I liked it so much, I think, because it meant I wasn't at home, and that was important to me, is just to not spend time at home. I didn't go on weekends, but on weekends I would do various things, worked at children's museums, typically, because they would work with younger volunteers. And mostly soup kitchens and things involving children. I worked at with deaf kids for a while.
And when you worked with deaf kids, what, if anything, did you do to learn to be able to work with them?
I pursued it. I audited a course at the community college, which I ended up going to get out of high school early. Later on, but I would audit classes. The teachers never wanted to kick the random 12-year-old out of their class, I suppose. So I remarkably was able to audit. She had heard about me from another bit part I did. I was taking jobs in Austin for really anything, to be an extra, to apply I did makeup once. Nothing, no job was too small or, for me. So I put myself out there, and she had heard about me, and she said, I have heard about you in this town, and I'd love to meet you in LA if you're ever out in LA. And I was like, when can I come? And she made an appointment with me for the following week, and I used all but $180 or something to get out there, and I landed. I didn't know anyone. I was 17. And I've effectively been there ever since, I suppose.
So I'm going to ask you to go from 2002 to 2009. If you could just describe for the jury a little bit what types of parts you had. I think they've indicated they didn't, you have not been well known here in this courtroom compared to Mr. Depp. So perhaps just take them through a little bit of that.
Yeah, that's fair. And that's kind of how it was in terms of my career for those that first initial 10 years or so. It was just going from slightly bigger role to slightly bigger role and just working my butt off. And what he told me was that this character is supposed to be the dream woman, like the dream, American dream. And so I knew what he meant. He indicated to me when he told me I got the role that I was that, that I was the dream kid. That's what he said. Just thinking what a strange experience the whole thing was. And, we didn't really have a whole lot of interaction on set until we did a scene that involved kissing. We had a kissing scene, and it didn't feel like a normal scene anymore. It felt more real. There are certain things that you do in the job to be professional, like when you have to do that sort of scene, and you don't you don't use your tongue if you can avoid it. There's certain things that you do to just maintain a certain line, and it just felt like those lines were blurred. I mean, he grabbed my face and pulled me into him and really kissed me. But we were filming a scene.
Did he use his tongue?
Yes.
Okay.
And then at one point, we talk about wine. It's another thing that Johnny and I shared in common, a love for wine, red wine. And we were talking about a kind of wine that I enjoyed, and I was, going on about how great this bargain wine was. And I didn't understand, how much more sophisticated Johnny's taste in wine was. So I was going on about the virtues of Malbec or something, and I brought him a bottle of this wine, and I set it down. And at some point, I'm going back to get back to set, and he kind of kicked his foot up in the air and basically kind of lifted the back of my bathrobe up.
And were you in a relationship at that time?
I was.
Okay. And was Mr. Depp in a relationship at that time?
That was my understanding, yeah. We just had this, it was a friendship, a flirtatious thing. I felt chemistry. I felt this other thing that went beyond the pale of my job. Johnny clearly felt that way about me, had indicated to me that that's how he felt in many different ways. But at the same time, we were both in relationships, and it is a job. And we had no contact until Johnny called me on the phone one day, and I was driving, and he invited me over to his home in California, in Beverly Hills. And it was out of the blue. I didn't even have his phone number. So it was quite unexpected. He called me a second time, but I don't think we actually connected, or we didn't stay on the phone because we didn't really speak. But the first time was the only time I actually spoke to him, and he invited me over to his house under kind of he said that, we could get Bruce, who was the director, to come over, something about the movie, but it was clearly not about the movie, if you know what I mean. It was, so I said, I said, my friends are in town, and I'm busy with that, and kind of hung up, feeling really startled, that didn't know what else to do. And then when I was away filming on a different job, he he did send me some guitars. I know one delivery, I was informed about one delivery, and my partner at the time intercepted the attempt to deliver and called me immediately and said, "What should I do?" And I said, send it back. and she did. And she indicated that there was, at the time, that there was another one that had already previously attempted delivery, and it was also rejected. I sent it back because I wasn't there, and I wouldn't have accepted it anyway.
And so you were then called to participate in the press tour for the Rum Diary?
Yes, I had I had just finished going through the process of separation with my former partner, and I was moving and going through that, and I got a phone call saying, remember that movie you did in Puerto Rico? Well, they want you for the press tour. And I said, well, perfect timing. And we did that, I think late October 2011. We did a press day, normal press day, and then at the end of it, I was invited by Johnny to come up to his room to have a drink with him and the director. Johnny and I started talking. He asked me about my relationship. I said, well, I'm going through it. I'm going through the separation right now, and it's been, rough couple of months, but that's normal. And he said, well, that's same with me. It's been, I can't remember exactly how long he said it had been, but that he had split from the mother of his kids, and said that he understood. And the talking became us, reconnect. It was like reconnection was almost instant. It was just chemistry. It's hard to explain that, but we sat on the couch and we talked, and it felt like there was it felt like there was an electricity to the room, and it's how I felt when I was alone with him anyway. And it was instant again. I was like, whoa. And we were falling in love. I mean, it was just, at the first dinner in London, he sat me next to me. He produced the film and was a part of controlling the film and was responsible for different things than I was as an actor having a small part in it. And we went on this press tour, and I think in London he had me sat next to him at a dinner, and then we ended up spending the night together in my hotel room. And for the rest of the press tour, it was on. I'll put it that way. The world didn't know about the split between he and his former partner. And of course, as a woman, I was like, is that troubling? And I'd ask him, he swore to me that they hadn't even shared a bed for a year, and that they were protecting the kids and not publicizing it. So Johnny pointed out that the world would blame me and call me a homewrecker, even though I had nothing to do with it. Yes. So shortly after, we, I think, started dating October of 2011, and as I mentioned, this bubble, where he'd come over to my house and not leave for like 3 or 4 days, just smoking cigarettes and playing music and reading poetry to me or painting me, or, just talking. And then he would disappear. And there'd be just no way to get a hold of him, no way to contact him. At first, I didn't really think anything about it, but he disappeared at one point, and then came back and said he was dealing with some health issue, and would I join him in the Bahamas? And I think that's when I learned he had an island, and I was on a trip with a friend of mine in Spain, and it was for the holidays, and I kind of rerouted my trip so I could come and land in LA landing in Miami instead of LA, so I could go and meet him on the island. And he had Keenan come and meet me on that trip, like in Miami. I get off one plane, get onto another, and go and join him on his private island.
So after the Bahamas, I assume you came back, and are we talking now early 2012?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what were you doing work-wise?
What I always do, I would be taking job to job to job, going from one movie to the next, mostly not filming in LA. So weirdly, you live in LA to go shoot on location in other places. So when I was in town, we would go back to this bubble, like insular bubble with beautiful, blaringly loud music and no one else and nothing else. And then, you know, I'd go off to work. And so would he. Well, eventually, yeah, he left to shoot Lone Ranger, I believe.
And were you shooting anything at that time?
I was shooting
Machete Kills?
I believe I was shooting Machete Kills in Austin. I had a small part in a Robert Rodriguez film that shot in Austin. But you know, I think Johnny was shooting and then having some time off, and there was just a lot of travel, a lot of movement. So, well, he was filming all over the Southwest, and at some point I came to visit him and on one of his locations, and I would stay in the house because I couldn't really, you know, occasionally I would leave with his security guards, but I didn't really have anything to do but visit him for a few days. So I'd cook and kind of stay at home and paint or whatever and wait for him to come home and have dinner ready. And we would have these little bubbles, but kind of scattered throughout the Southwest and as he was filming. And at the time, Johnny had, you know, when I first arrived at one of these locations, it was the first time that Johnny told me that he had had a health issue, something with his liver, and that he wasn't, that's why he was not drinking. He was drinking a lot of tea, like a lot of tea. I suppose that I took off his boots, and it made an impression on him, and I was happy to, you know, anything I can do to show love, certainly how I felt about him. But if he wanted to take off his own boots, he certainly could. And at some point, I don't really remember exactly when it was, but at some point I picked up what I thought was a really beautiful turquoise handled knife. And I had it engraved with a saying that Johnny would say to me all the time, which I, you know, thought was romantic, as funny as that is to say now.
And what was the expression, the saying?
Until death, hasta la muerte in Spanish. Oh, well, starting really early on, Johnny was so kind, so generous to my family, but especially my mom and dad. He met my dad, and my dad's a big personality. He's a rowdy guy, and Johnny just all of a sudden, I had never noticed, you know, Johnny have a southern, all of a sudden Johnny had this southern accent and was really like buddies with him, and they really seemed to get along very well. They're, you know, just like instantly he was giving my dad gifts, he gave him guns, he gave him knives. They had this, I mean, Johnny just really just showered my dad, and my dad's a working man, you know, salt of the earth guy, and he was just like, you know, floored. He's getting all these amazing gifts and being invited to come on to these locations, and, you know, Johnny's this big movie star, and my dad was just like, you know, I think my dad would have married him himself, not if I hadn't. And he just instantly, he gave my mom jewelry, brought her out to come and see me while I was visiting Johnny on Lone Ranger in some part of the Southwest. I think it was Colorado. He gave her this beautiful turquoise necklace, and I mean, they were definitely taken by him. I believe the relationship came a little bit later as they got to know each other, but he did the same thing with my sister and just really found a bond with them that, you know, was, it was, you know, he tried to do anything and everything he could to make them feel like special, and they did, you know, my mom, my dad, and my sister. it's a lot. And he did that with my close friends. I relied heavily on my friends and had a pretty strong support network with them. And he really just showered them with generosity and love and light, and invited them to come to these exotic places and flew people here and there. I mean, he's incredibly generous. Johnny at one point insisted on buying me a horse, and I, of course, said that's extravagant. There's no way I could accept that. That's also, how will I take care of that horse? It's so extravagant. So I said no, of course. Eventually, he got a hold of my dad and worked it out with my dad, like what kind of horse to buy, and then showed me a picture of this horse and said, "It's yours. It's coming here." I think it was being transported, and he said, that he had my dad's help on it, picking out. And I grew up on my dad's horses. I grew up riding with my dad, so he would make these comments about whoring myself out, but do so in the context of me acting, and he would talk about other actresses who do my role in this way, where they were worthless whores, that they were fame hungry, expletive, just this. The point is, it felt really dirty. It was dirty that I wanted to do this job that I wanted to do, and I was doing the job of an actress. It was every time I was walking out of the house, he would ask me, "That's really what you're wearing, kid? Oh, I see." I wore a dress to an event once, and I showed it him because it's a carpet, it's red carpet, so it's like, publicized, and I kind of thought it was weird he wasn't saying anything about it. I left him to go do this red carpet, and I was like, "Did you see the event I went to?" Basically, I felt pretty, and I thought, like, "Did you see that?" I wanted him to say something about that, I guess. And he said, I said, "Did you see that thing?" And he said, yeah, I think the whole world saw that, kid. That's how they'll remember you. That's how the world will remember you. And I was like, oh, come on. I mean, it's like, but I felt good in it. I felt good. And he said, "Yeah, kid, that's what you're putting out there in the world. No one will ever forget that. And that's all they'll see you as. That's what you wanted. That's what you were going for. My dress was low cut. I get it. It's low cut." And it continued. And then there would be a blow up. And at first it was just to throw something, smash some things. It loves to smash up a place, an apartment, furniture. Is what it started with. Glass. Threw glass at me, and I remember it was summer. And he just threw this glass across the kitchen, and it didn't hit me, but it shattered behind me, and I remember thinking that it very easily could have hit me. And that, calling me a whore, it didn't start with using the whore word, it was just comments, until it would escalate.
Do you remember the first time that he physically hit you?
Yes.
Please tell the jury about it.
It's seemingly so stupid, so insignificant. I will never forget it. It changed my life. I was sitting on the couch, and I asked him about the tattoo he has on his arm. And to me, it just looked like black marks. I didn't know what it said. It just looked like muddled, faded tattoo that was hard to read. And I said, "What does it say?" And he said it says wino. It says wino. And I didn't see that. I thought he was joking because it didn't look like it said that at all. And I laughed. It was that simple. I just laughed because I thought he was joking. And slapped me across the face. And I laughed. I laugh because I didn't know what else to do. I thought, this must be a joke. You would think you would have a response, but I, as a woman, had never been hit like that. I'm an adult, and I'm sitting next to the man I love, and he slapped me for no reason, it seemed like, and I missed the point. It was that stupid. Second slap, I know he's not kidding, but I don't know what else to say or do, so I just stared at him. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I didn't move or freak out or defend myself or say, what are you doing? You're crazy. I just stared at him because I didn't know what else to do. And he slaps me one more time. Hard. I wish so much he had said he was joking. Because it didn't hurt. It didn't physically hurt me. I was just sitting there on this carpet, looking at the dirty carpet, wondering how I wound up on this carpet and why I never noticed that the carpet was so filthy before, and I just didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. I just sat there thinking, how much time do I have till I figure out what I need to do? Because, God, did he just hit me? I know you can't hit a woman. You can't hit a man. You can't hit anyone. You can't just hit somebody because I knew it was wrong, and I knew that I had to leave him. And, I had never seen an adult man cry. I didn't even really see my dad cry at my grandma's funeral. It's weird. And he's crying. Tears, just falling out of his eyes. He gets down on his knees and he grabs my hands and he's touching my hands and he's saying to me, I will never do that again. I'm so sorry, baby. I put the fucker away. I thought I killed it and it's done. I thought I put the monster away and I've done it before. It's done. But on his knees. And he seemed so sorry, but I knew I couldn't just forgive him because that means it will happen again, no? I've seen the health class videos, like everyone else. And I got up in my car, I walked to the car, I didn't say anything. I made a point to not say, oh, it's okay, or anything like that. I just didn't say anything. Seeing my breath and trying to will myself to have the strength to know what I should do in this moment, because I was heartbroken. And I sat there for a long time, and I eventually turned the key and drove home. And he showed up to talk, with the understanding that, he understood I could never forgive him and it was done. So I felt kind of safe in saying, okay, let's have a talk, or, yeah, we'll talk. I think I know I just wanted to see him, and he comes over, brings me gifts. He brought me a couple of cases, actually, of that Vega Sicilia wine that we've heard about, which is a really nice, expensive wine that I could never, at that time, dream of affording, and we talk, and he tells me that he had put this thing away. He'd start drinking again, the disappearing thing, the coming back. He'd come back in the middle of the night to my house. And it would be unclear to me, drunk, often really drunk, and kind of accusing me, but not directly. Nothing was very direct. It was a lot of accusations, but they were veiled. What I was wearing, who I was with, why didn't I text him back? I didn't text him back right away. This is when I was at my place in Orange. Sometimes he would show up to catch me. That was a pretext for coming over. And by the time we were done talking, I would have thought I had convinced him that I loved him, that I only loved him, there was no one else, and then that we were back in an upswing and would go back to good, loving, sick, romantic love. And then it would be something I said. Why did you say it that way? You know, if I had to leave for an audition, I could guarantee that when couldn't guarantee, but 2 of those in a row, and when I came back, he was angry at me, you know, and I wouldn't necessarily know why. And then he started accusing me of things, probably, like, at first it was indirect, and then it became really direct. Then the punching of the walls next to my head, which is a constant at that time in 2012 when he was drinking. Eventually that became, you know, him accusing me of cheating. I'd defend myself. I'd say, you know, that's crazy. You're wrong. I would never, the normal things. And it would escalate to the point where he would push me or shove me down, and then I'd get back up. And this happened several times. That's why it's not more specific, I suppose. When I'd get back up, I'd look him in the eye. I made a point of getting up and looking him in the eye. It's my way of defending myself at that time. And I'd look at him, and he'd ask me if I wanted to go again, and shove me back down. Eventually, he just hit me. Remember, he hit me in the face when I denied having an affair with my ex-wife, my ex-partner at the time. And he said he had proof. I denied it. And I was walking out of the bedroom, slapped me across the face. I turned to look at him. And I said, Johnny, you hit me. You just hit me. And then I was doing something wrong clearly, but it was unclear within the scope of an argument what I was defending myself against. So it would shift from a rumor he had heard that I was with a friend, or I had been photographed standing too close to a male person. That was a person I had had something with, and I was lying to him about, and it would be eggshells, accusations, and then he would explode. It started with throwing things, destroying the property, and screaming at me. I remember the screaming at me was the worst, because I kind of always felt like I had done, you know, I had to defend myself. I had to tell him so he didn't think these things were true. And sometimes, you know, he would shift accusations while I'm trying to dispel one accusation. He'd start another one, and nothing I could do to calm him down. It seemed like I'd walk away, and that would make it worse. I remember in my apartment in Orange, he would grab me by the hair, or he'd grab me by the arm, pull me into him, scream at me that way. He'd smash things around me. Then he would smash things very close to me. And then he would just hit me. And it started with slapping, and it got to be like repetitive slaps where he'd hold me in a position and slap me multiple times in a row. Then it would be, you know, eventually I later would either push him off of me, or I'd try to hit his hands away from me. I'd try to, not in 2012 so much. At that time, I was mostly, my defense was, I'd go some other place. Like, I don't know how to describe that. It was, I'd focus on something else. I'd stand up, look at him, try to stand up to him that way. Later, I adopted other kind of strategies to deal with it, but at the time in 2012, it was, he'd have this blowout, and then he would leave, disappear, and I'd be committed to not talking to him. I'm done with this relationship. I can't take it anymore. I said that so many times. And then he'd come back, clean and sober, telling me either he had a chip. He didn't have any chips, but he would say, I've gone to meetings. And we'd be back in the good bubble, the warm glow. And eventually I'd get bored, and then I'd see him drinking again. When I started to get upset, noticing the pattern of the violence going with the drinking and drugs, then he started sneaking it. So it became less clear, and I'd have to look for clues as to what he was on. So I just knew how to react, you know. Johnny on speed is very different from Johnny on opiates. Johnny on opiates, very different from...
Did you confide in anyone about these issues you were having?
I eventually told my mom.
And let's go ahead and take a look at Defendant's Exhibit 150.
Your Honor, I'm going to object on hearsay. Yeah.
Why did you decide to confide in your mother?
I knew that she understood these dynamics and she wouldn't judge me for staying with him, for loving him, even though this was happening and was happening to me. I knew she would understand.
And when approximately did you start confiding in your mom about your issues with Mr. Depp and the physical abuse?
I was confiding in her from the very beginning about the abuse, the psychological abuse, the kind of control, the disappearing, the not knowing where he was, then he'd come back and sometimes in the middle of the night, the constant accusations, like that sort of thing. I talked to her about probably from the very beginning. The fact that I was secret, I had to hide. I couldn't tell any of my friends that I was with him for a long time because he told me everyone would blame me for the split with him and his partner. So I had to kind of sneak around and kind of get brought to his house, typically in a secretive way. And then he'd come to mine in a secretive way. And it was just all very, so very isolating. And I confided with her at the very beginning on that sort of thing. And then later opened up to her about some of the violence. I did it gently. First I just wanted to have someone to talk to about how scary it was. The rage and the uncontrolled violence, the rage that this man had, and why it was
Objection,
pointed
Your
at
Honor.
me.
Hearsay. May we approach, please?
Okay.